On this episode, double episode, 43-44. Is it 43-44?
Yeah.
Haven't read the questions, let's get into it. What's up, guys? This is Blake Rodriguez with Dream Come True K9, and this is episode 43-44 of Dog Behavior Question Tuesday. Let's jump right into it and introduce the pack. This guy's gonna be getting picked up soon, so Kim is actually on that. Why don't you pan over to Kim? We'll introduce her right away. She doesn't want to be on camera, so we're gonna show her. She has her makeup ready. She went out last night, so so that's what we have going on. We're gonna start over this way. We have Samson Soko, Vicente, Julieta, Alfie, oh my gosh, I almost forgot Rasta. We have Gambit, Digby, Maya, Maxwell, Muffin, Nino Man, Maggie, and I think that's everybody, right? And the big dog, all right? Nino. All right, so we actually posted two questions, or two on our Instagram page, ask your question, dog behavior question here. So I'm gonna be pulling from the very first one and we'll be jumping to the next one. So the first question is from Ozzy. How do I know if I'm using the e-collar correctly? So a little bit of a short kind of question, but a couple of things. There's an order to how we teach it. In the beginning, we teach it or we use it once behaviors are already known, once a dog's already really good at doing those behaviors, then we introduce that. We introduce it in an order, which is a scientific order, science-based, and I hate using that word, but it's very true. What the dog knows least comes first in the sequence. That's how you create conditioned responses, so it's very important to know that. That's Pavlov 101. By the time we're introducing the remote sensation is, I see that she's taking a picture, so I'm gonna try and, the remote sensation is actually coming on first before the command. So there's actually an order to how we teach it. It's body comes first. There's body with food lure, working for food. There's body with leash. Whether I'm the leash or the food, my hands is an extension of what my body is doing. So that's very important to understand. Whether I'm guiding a dog with food or I'm guiding a dog with leash, it's following my body. Once those two things are good, we're basically using positive reinforcement, which is paired with negative punishment. I won't get too technical with those things. And also negative reinforcement. We're not getting into positive punishment at the end, so we're primarily working with 3 quadrants. I've covered this on other YouTube and episodes and stuff, so definitely check that out. There's blogs on it and Periscope episodes as well. But we're using those things, and when that is really good and we have dogs performing behaviors, let's go ahead and say going to place and being yesed, or going to place and getting good for whatever markers that we're teaching. We actually use verbal markers, so we have more adjustability than just the click, right? And that's very important. The click is not something that I'm bashing. It's actually very valuable and really cool because it's a consistent sound, which is fantastic for puppies when you're teaching tricks and dog trick-like behaviors in the early stages. But one of the problems is it has no adjustability. But let me not go off on a tangent here. Once we have that really good and we have the dog who's doing the behavior, and we're guiding them there with food, or we're guiding them there with leash, or a little bit of both, and they're yesing, and that's looking really sharp. I go, hey, you know that thing that you're doing, which is already place? This is what it's called. So now the order is place, then I do what I've already been doing to get the dog to perform that behavior. It's very important that you understand that. When that is looking good and the dog is sharp, now I introduce into a new language, which is the remote. After finding the level, the remote, place, then what I've been doing to get the dog to go on, all right? Once that's really good, eventually you start to fade out from using it so often, and it begins to transfer into for non-compliance only. When you get to this stage, I think it's really important to understand that when you're using it as a correction and when it is non-compliance, you must, make sure I word this right, you must know that if you're ever dialing up on a behavior and you're using it for non-compliance, that when the dog wasn't doing it originally and they feel the remote or you dialed up, the dog goes faster into the desired behavior or the behavior that you're asking. If you're dialing up or you're using it and you see a dog that's confused, a dog that pancakes, a dog that runs to place when you were recalling him or does something different, that's a sign that you need to stop, take a couple of steps back, and really start to teach what the remote pressure means, which means you need to go back to using some of those training wheel tools prior to the remote. So backtrack, we have the leash, we have the food, we have the name. Use those things to help make it clear what the dog should, body language, all that stuff, to help make it clear, thank you, that's very important, what the dog should be doing in order to solve the puzzle and make the sensation go away. That's how you know, okay? I think I kind of went deep with that one, all right? That's what she said? Is that inappropriate? HR? Check this out. This is Impulse Control 101. For the guys that see, well, I guess none of them really saw. Maybe some of them saw. Doesn't matter, right? Let's see, the next question. Carlo, you're killing me, man. You asked like 39 different things, different questions. It's all good. Let's get into it. How do you correct transition in a dog when they're working for their meals? So I know English is not your first language. I'm going to try and like break it up the way I think I'm reading it correctly. How do you know, or how do you transition dogs when they're working their meals in the early stages when you feed them twice a day and also reward the commands? How do you do for the always focus? How do you get to the point where you're basically getting dogs to perform from your hands and working every day out of food to basically getting that type of attention or focus without the food? So that's a really good question, and it's funny because it's actually something that Tyler Muto and I talk about in our workshops. Shameless plug, Understanding Dog Behavior. We'll have new dates soon for that. But everyone always either talks about working food or they're talking about pressure and not working with food, but people aren't talking about how to get off of it. And a lot of times, as a result, people become dependent on food. So when you're getting off of food, there's a couple of things that you want to do. You want to start gambling. So when I say gambling, if we know that we are getting to the point where I don't know, for example, let's say I'm guiding the dog with food to place and then I'm yesing. Guiding the dog to food with place and then I'm yesing. And out of 10 times, one time, I don't guide the dog the entire way. I maybe kind of suggest and point a little, but I take away a little bit of information and the dog is a rock star and actually does a really good job, and then I yes him. The next couple of repetitions, I'm not going to be like, oh, that means that dog has it. The next couple of repetitions, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right back to doing what I've been doing, doing what I've been doing, and then every two, I might suggest, and then he gets it, and I might go back to doing it, and then two without, the full training wheels. The same applies for remote. The same applies for food. Without food, you can get to a point where you're using food, and all of a sudden you don't use food on one, and then you go to the next one using food, and you start feeding at a random feeding schedule. There's actually studies that show that raises dopamine levels and creates more of an addiction. So the concept for that is almost like when you are playing the slot machines. You don't play the slot machines because you get paid every time you play. You play the slot machines because you got a little bit of a taste of winning. And then the next 5, you don't get it. But you continue to play because you know there's a shot that you could win big or you could get a little bit more. So it creates more of an addiction if you don't feed every single time. And once you get to a certain stage, you start feeding at a random feeding schedule rather than a fixed rate. Okay? So hopefully that helps to answer your question.
Why don't you bring up, first off, the fact that taking the food off
You're on the mic, bro. Go for it.
Well. We do like the drills with the landmines.
Down.
I think it's important to mention that when you're doing all this, you're making
Digby, down. Down. Good.
You're making all the other tools that you use, you're laying it over with the food, very clear, body language, whatever training collars you have on, like the e-collar or the prong collar, you're really shaping how the dog reacts to those things.
Hey. Good.
So that the focus isn't just on the food.
Hey. Mm-hmm.
So you're really shaping all the other information or languages that you're using so that the focus isn't just on the food. So when you make the transition, it's a little easier. And also there's little things that you could do like with the manners minder to transition food off of you.
Manners minder, so it's also known as a treat and train.
Yeah.
That's actually a really good one. So sometimes what we'll do is you want to get a dog to realize that the reason they're getting food is for choices that they're making. And one of the main choices that you want them making is you want them paying attention to you. You want to become relevant in the relationship. Hey. So in order to do that, one cool early step is you have a manners minder or a treat and train, which is like this little machine where you have a remote and you can dispense food with the remote. Now you don't have food on you. So all of a sudden you're working, and you might have food in the beginning to kind of help the dog, but the dog performs the behavior, and then you press the button and you yes them, and they can go over there to get the food, which is no longer associated with you. So the dog is not listening to you and focusing on you because you have food. The dog is listening to you and focusing on you because paying attention to you benefits them and has a really good shot of paying off. It's a very big difference, and we were talking about this earlier, I think yesterday, right, even? There's a very big difference between using food to get good behavior and using food to reward good behavior. We like to do the latter. Nailed it.
That was a good little snippet part, but
Yeah.
it's very important. The big difference there is really paying attention to the way the dogs react to all the other tools you use to communicate, and not just the food. So I can pay attention to how they respond to body language and the remote collar and the prong collar, and not so much just because you have food.
You know, I think what's important is people don't realize how complex or advanced markers can actually be. A marker is not only just a verbal. When we're adding pressure, when we're releasing pressure, those are marking specific moments in time. And a lot of people have bad timing, so they're marking at the wrong time. So if you're using leash pressure, like this is what Andrew's trying to get at, and maybe I'm saying it different, so it might resonate, or he might have already hit it on the head. But if you're using a certain tool with a leash and a dog responds a certain way and food is coming after that, it gives a dog a better shot to realize that the dog is responding the way that you had hoped for or you're looking for, rather than like, oh, the dog's not listening to this, here's the food and getting it. It's like, good job, that's what I want, and then they get food, or a yes for responding that way, depending on the stage in the game that you're at, right? Let's see where we are. We also have Cynthia on here. Make sure I didn't miss anybody else. Okay, cool. So I have a 5-month-old, and actually, Carlo had a couple things. Thanks for the advice. I got that. I forgot this. When you're not using food, do you use the marker? Yes. It depends. You can use good or yes. Usually at that stage in the game, if you're trying to have a dog continue doing something, you're using good. If you want a dog to be free and release, or you're teaching something that's new, and the moment they nail it, you want to say that's completion and not continue it, then it is the yes, right? Cynthia, I have a 5-month-old German Shepherd dog that is going through a fear stage. We're at the park playing ball, and he took off running and barking after a lady and her stroller and not listening to me at all. I understand he's going through a rebellion fear stage. Other than counter conditioning, how should I proceed to help him get over this stage? He's barking at almost all dogs and people for some reason. We start formal training again in 2 weeks. Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to let you know what training actually is. Forget formal training. And I don't want to say forget it, but stop viewing training as training time, right? It's not going to benefit you if training time is 1 hour at the gym and the other 23 hours of the day, you're eating ho-hos, drinking Mountain Dew, eating cheese doodles, hitting the booze hard, hitting the drugs hard, partying, and living the complete opposite of what you're doing in that gym. That gym time should be what's setting you up for the lifestyle you want to continue to live and lead in the everyday real world situations. What you have to realize is that both you and your dog need to be studying for the test of everyday life. Everyday life brings you a lot of distractions, I guess it is. Everyday life brings you a lot of tests, and you don't want to practice or study necessarily in the everyday life situations. You want that to be the test where you say, hey, this is what we've been practicing for. I'm going to ask you to do this, and the dog knows how to do it. So think that way. That's really going to help you. But let me actually try and get a little bit more in depth. I think that in all honesty, is your answer for you to kind of realize. But okay, so a couple of things. When you're dealing with fear, you can't correct fear. I can't correct a dog and say, don't be afraid. Right? But what I can do is I can teach them a better choice and an alternative behavior when they're afraid. And when I drill it and I drill it and I drill it, and a dog breaks that, I can then address that and say, no, listen, I know you're afraid, but the behavior that you're choosing, running away, is not allowed. I also have to be considerate in this stage. I can't now bring a stroller and roll it by him and do this and say, you have to stay. I have to work with flooding in a way where I can control the floodgates. And controlling the floodgates, I'm dealing with proximity, or I'm dealing with volume, depending on what's going on. I'm dealing with space and all that stuff. It's really, really important. So I need to make sure I'm working systematically so the dog is little by little being challenged more and more. But at the same time, hey, good. At the same time, I'm teaching the dog what to do, and then I'm expecting him to follow that behavior. Rasa, you're doing good, bud. This is new for you. So Rasa actually has done a couple of group training sessions, but hasn't completed it, and he's been here for a little bit with us. And this is a boy that is super, super nervous as well. So that's why I'm kind of addressing him, and I'm saying, don't be concerned with what's happening. Learn to kind of ignore that. And you're also in the front. You're not in the back over here. So I'm actually controlling the floodgates here in a way where I'm saying, I know this is a challenge, but I have you facing this way, and you know leash pressure to an extent where you're not feeling this and like, what do I do? You're like, oh, I'm turning, and I'm kind of helping. So I've kind of been doing that with him the entire time. If you follow us on Facebook and Instagram and all that stuff, you've actually seen, Instagram stories, how nervous and shut down this dog was. And Kim actually just filmed a video the other day. Was it today or yesterday? This morning, of him like starting to get happy and working for his food, and that was something that you didn't see at all. This boy was like scared of life. So we're teaching him how to hold positions, and then we're teaching him, we're using this physical position to get to a point, look at this cutie, to get to a point where it influences the brain and settles the brain. Once we get that, this is not completion. Once we get that, we're taking this mindset and we're teaching him how to move. Because this is a dog that was like flighty and would do this and would do that and kind of run and just not focus. So that hopefully sums that up for you. So what we're going to do is we're going to jump right over into the other questions, which is from the last post. We have a couple here. We actually have more. That question is from Therese. What does it mean when your dog stares at you? Are they googly eyes, or are they trying to impose dominance? Should you engage in eye contact? I don't think there's one set definition for this. I actually think this is a great question. Sometimes dogs are just looking at you to see what they should be doing. They're looking for more direction. Sometimes dogs are looking at you because they're super anxious. And they're super anxious and they're expecting something and they're whining. Sometimes engaging with your dog and looking and nurturing it, if you're sitting at like a presentation and your dog is included, good, focus on me, is fantastic. Sometimes it's building other things. So you have to do a good job at kind of trusting your gut and determining what type of look it is. Because I could be looking at you because I think you're hot. I could be looking at you because when you leave this bar, I'm gonna kill you. Right? There's a lot of different ways. I could be looking at you because I have a bone to pick with you, and it depends on how that's being looked at. You guys are killing me with these texts back and forth.
No, actually, no. When you get off, you'll see how funny it is.
Okay. So hopefully that helps you. I know that's a short answer, but that's about as detailed as I can get with that. Oh, so I do know you and your dog. A lot of times that's more of an anxious case, right? That's more of what are you doing? Over here. Okay, where are you going? Are you acknowledging me? Are you going to call me to pet you over? I've been in place for a while. You're going to kind of, is that food for me? Kind of oh, I'm on place. Oh, I'm in the crate. Are we going to play? And it's a little unsettling. So there has to be kind of this expectation to not expect to have to look and figure it out, but expect to just do that, be there, and when I need you or I need to give you direction, I'm going to tell you, bud. So we need to have him relax and not really worry so much. I think it's coming more of a worried, anxious place, and that's only because I know you and your dog, right? Somebody else could be asking this question, and I would have no clue. So, let's see. Wedge Master, what's up, Zokes? My puppy likes to bite me and my wife, but doesn't bite anyone else. Why is it? Or why is that, and what can we do to stop her? She has very sharp teeth. You want to take this one?
No, you got it.
So a couple things. I'm not sure how old your puppy is, but I'm pretty sure it's on the younger side. Your dog loves you and bites with you and play bites and stuff like that, but here's a couple things that we have to realize. Dogs don't grow out of behaviors. They tend not to. So it's our job to help them grow out of it before they grow into it. Your dog is doing stuff that's like relatively natural. It's a mixture of teething, it's a mixture of like playing with you and biting you, and here's the reality. Dogs' skin and necks and stuff can handle that. I mean, you can have a lab that can go out barefoot in the middle of winter and snow and be out there for 3 hours before it comes in cold. It might even go in the water, like hunting dogs will do that, right? We can only stand out there for 30 seconds. Dogs, if you've ever seen them play bites and kind of roughhouse and stuff, if you've seen Soko and Samson in clips that we do, or like Copper and Dizzy, Copper and Maxwell, that type of play is just play. But if they were to do that to us, our skin is too fair. So it's our job to kind of interrupt that. And before you replace it with something, you want to correct it and address it in a way where it changes their mindset. You ask for something else, you get it, something more than just don't bite, like, hey, go do this, really good, and then you can go give them something that they're allowed to chew on. Because at that stage, you don't necessarily want them to not chew. You just want to start breaking it down between what's acceptable and what's not, okay? Kaylee Rhodes, I only have 20% battery life, so I gotta get through this. A couple questions. How do I stop my pregnant, I guess I can say bitch, right? Because that's how it's worded, but it's actually like right? How do I stop, I'm going thuggish. I'm cursing over here, inappropriate, R-rated, son. How do I stop my pregnant bitch from bullying my 13-year-old bitch? She just started this when she became pregnant. Do you think, so even right there, I can interrupt him and I can use leash pressure this way to say, focus on what we're doing. So to make sure that was more of a correction, that's unacceptable. You got to focus on this, and you actually know leash pressure. So this is foundation stuff where I don't expect him to be able to make the choice on his own. I have to help him. So I'm creating habits here. And I'm also cueing in certain sounds. So eventually I don't have to use this. The sounds will be something where he'll make the choice on his own. She just started this when she became pregnant. Do you think it will leave after she whelps? Then my 4-month-old pup gets a little food aggressive around other dogs. Mostly she just freezes until the dog leaves, but has snarled a couple of times. You need to take more control. Your dogs have too much freedom, and it's entirely up to them. And I say this a lot, I've said this before, you're putting your dog into situations, or your dogs, where they're 50-50 shots, and you're not helping yourself increase the odds. So when I say 50-50 shots, it's a 50-50 shot whether this is gonna work or not, but it's 100% up to the dogs, and you have no influence or relevance over the situation. That's what needs to change. So you need to stop leaving it up to them and tell them how it works and set the tone and start teaching them things where if they're doing these things, it doesn't put them in a position where they're allowed to do this, right? Get to that point where you're a little bit more relevant. Don't put it on the excuse of pregnancy, of this, or that. That might have a little bit of an influence, but if that behavior is starting to work and it's practicing and they're allowed to control and manipulate one another and kind of set rules amongst each other where sometimes that's not an issue, but if they're setting rules amongst each other where certain things are inappropriate, then they shouldn't be in positions to basically set those rules amongst one another. So you need to take on a bigger role. What I would suggest is going through our Dog Behavior Question Tuesday Index, which is on our website in our blog, and looking through all the questions that have ever been asked so you can start to take your time at creating a foundation and becoming relevant. Also, check out our blog on our website, which will break things down and kind of give you a better understanding of where to start. Let's see, last but not least, canine cardio. One of my rescues came to us terrified of the crate, not too sure of the whole history, but have been told she was left in there for awful lengths of time. I've tried conditioning her to the crate. She now goes in and out, no problem. She lays down in it. She seems comfortable even when I close the door. I've been trying to make a positive association with the crate by only giving her high-value treats such as raw meat, bones, kongs, etc. She's crazy food-driven. I thought it would help speed up the process, but she'll only eat in the crate when I'm present. I have yet to leave her for more than 10 minutes alone still, but she does go in periodically during the day when I'm home doing things around the house, and she's fine. I was able to spy through the window without her seeing me one day, as I wanted to see what she does, and when I'm gone, within 1 minute, she starts panting heavily, so there's definitely stress happening. How can I help her? Well, a couple things. If she's panting, but she's not going wild, a lot of times panting is a healthy release, rather than keeping it in and going nuts or kind of barking. When you get to the point that that means the brain is working. There's good stress and there's bad stress. And when a dog is working through some stuff, or I'm panting and I'm working out, there's a degree of stress that my body is going through, but it's good because I'm growing, right? You need to start dealing with a little bit of leaving your dog at certain times. And also what I would suggest is, in this situation, what you can do is you can start leaving food in there and feeding time or whatever you want to do only when you're leaving. And if it's still there when you're gone, pick it up and put it away, and you only put that food down when it's time to leave. So your dog learns to start functioning, because a lot of times it's a mental block. The brain is like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm interested in leaving or eating because a lot of things are going on. I don't know if I can do this. And prioritizing and eating is something that is no longer an option for the dog. We need the dog to learn how to function through that stress and past that, so they can go, man, I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm hungry, let me eat. Ooh, that was a good meal, I guess I'm a little tired, and settle. And the only way to do that is to make it instinctual. So we have to get to a point where it's a little bit more urgent, and the dog might miss a couple meals and eventually goes, man, I'm hungry, I gotta eat this. And if you're gonna use food that way. Another thing that I would suggest is having your dog spend time in there a little bit regularly. When you leave, even if you're like going to the store and coming back, when you come back home, don't open the door right away. If you're gonna open the door, have the dog hold that position for a little bit, you know what I mean? And do a couple things, then release the dog, you know what I mean? So you're on the right track, but you just need to start pushing a little bit more, okay? Guys, awesome double episode, 43, 44. Thank you so much for participating and watching. I will see you guys next week for 45. Later.